Hey team, you're about to experience my interview with Simon Molnar from Flagship. He's the founder of Flagship, and Flagship is a full end-to-end digital visual merchandising platform for physical retail stores. This brings a digital overlay to all the visual merchandising that merchandisers typically do manually, spreadsheets, etc., and moves this all into a digital workspace with a complete end-to-end visual merchandising analytics to track performance of your merchandising changes. Enjoy. This is the E-commerce Edge podcast with your host, Jason Greenwood. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Pod. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome Simon Molnar from Flagship to The Pod. Welcome, Simon. My pleasure to have you along for the ride today. Now, I think anybody who's working in digital, if they haven't heard of you, I wonder what rock they have been living under, especially not only your new technology, but obviously your family background, your brother's business and business that you helped to run as well. The reality is that you guys have been doing this digital thing for a very long time. And as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, actually your first foray into this digital thing was taking a traditional family business and shifting it online. Is that correct?
Exactly, 100%.
So tell me all about that. Like, how did that come about?
Yeah, so my parents had a brick and mortar jewelry store here in Sydney for over 30 years. So I was brought up on jewelry and on retail, and I started selling some of their jewelry on eBay, and one thing led to another. I ended up handing the keys over to my brother, and then we realized an opportunity to turn that eBay business into a standalone website. So we found a company in the US that was a pure play retailer over there, brought them over to Australia, leaned on a couple of their suppliers, some local suppliers as well, and had to teach ourselves ecom. It was still relatively early. It was somewhat mature, but it was still very early in the grand scheme of things. It wasn't as, I don't know, out of the box as it is today. And we had to teach ourselves everything. We had to teach ourselves how to upload product. We had to teach ourselves how to fulfill, how to warehouse, how to digitally market, how to rank on Google, all these things that we just had to learn from the ground up. But I guess when you have to learn it, you just do learn it.
Yeah, and I think the good thing about that is, and it's similar because I had my own e-commerce pure play as well back in the day, and this I've been working in this space for over 20 years now, and there was nothing easy about e-commerce like 20 plus years ago. Everything was hard. There was just no trust by the general public in online buying. There was the default expectation that people were going to get ripped off. There was the default expectation they were going to put in their credit card and they're never going to see the money again, and that basically their card was going to get scammed. And so those early adopters, from a buying perspective, it took a fair amount of courage back in the day. And I remember when I first started my e-commerce pure play with my business partner, we would get routine, like every day, we would get between 2 and 5 phone calls from people ringing up just to see if we were real, like if we were real people and if we really existed. And for some reason, I don't know why back in the day, whether crime was rife in Nicaragua, but oftentimes they would say, "Are you really in New Zealand, or are you someplace like Nicaragua? And is my credit card safe with you? Now I'm calling a New Zealand free phone number, but I hear an American accent. Can you tell me about that?" So there was a lot of very interesting conversations when I first started in the game, and I'm sure you too. There was just a general distrust of digital buying, and I feel like we've now got to a place where the default trust level is pretty high. Yes, you still have to build a brand. Yes, you still have to have trust marks. Yes, you still have to have UGC. Yes, you still have to look legit. Yes, you still have to have amazing photographs and all the other things that go along with being a good, solid retailer that's building trust around your brand in the market. But it feels like the nuts and bolts process of actually getting up and running in the first place, that has definitely gotten significantly easier.
100%. Coming back to that trust point, if you felt like you had trouble building trust, imagine what arguably were the first people selling jewelry online. If you're buying a t-shirt, there's one element of trust, but if you're buying a ring, there's even greater level of trust. I remember we'd start selling we started selling jewelry online, and people thought we were crazy. Who's going to outlay that amount of money online? Who's going to buy this jewelry that they've never seen before, that they haven't been able to feel and touch and try on? And it took a lot of educating. And I guess we did roll out in a structured way. We went more with branded product where our customers knew what they were getting. So Thomas Sabo, Michael Kors, you know what you're buying. And over time, we were able to build the trust from our customers to encourage them to spend thousands of dollars on high-end jewelry. And that was really our bread and butter. That was what drove majority of our margin. And that's what we were able to build as a successful business on top of.
And to your point, when I went to buy my wife's engagement ring and like wedding set, I didn't buy in New Zealand because there was limited range. There was limited opportunity for customization, and if you wanted something custom made, it cost, like, it was very expensive. This is only going back a few years ago now. And so I ended up buying online, and I went through James Allen in the United States, one of the biggest online jewelers in America. I was able to pick my stone online from their selection of stones. I was able to pick the exact cut that I wanted, the color, the cut, the clarity. I was pretty much able to spec out my own diamond the way that I wanted it. It was a heart-shaped cut, which is pretty rare in New Zealand. Like, it's really hard to find, much more common in the United States. I was able to design a custom setting with their online service, and we had a bit of back and forth via email and just make sure it was drawn up exactly as we had envisaged it to be, and paid paid my money online, thousands of dollars online. And then like 4 weeks, I think it was 4 weeks or 6 weeks later, they had it all ready to go. They had it all packaged up, ready to ship. And I bought my wedding ring just from one of their stock lines, just an off-the-shelf line. They shipped it all together over to me in New Zealand. And it was like an amazing experience. And as somebody who works in e-commerce, I was blown away by the level of detail and quality of the photos and the zooms and the 360-degree views of these individual stones. Like their experience, clearly they have invested very heavily into that. And it feels like for those higher end luxury goods like jewelry, now the bar is higher, as opposed to just using your maybe an off the shelf Shopify store with no customization. You're going to have to bring something a bit unique to the customer experience for people to lay out that cash.
100%. A big focus for us was positioning ourselves as a luxury retailer, because we're selling jewelry. We had to make sure our packaging was luxury. Our boxes that would ship in were luxury. But we also had to make sure we were discreet enough to make sure that no one knew there was jewelry inside, because we didn't want to risk theft or loss along the way.
Yeah, so you were talking about how you positioned yourself as a luxury retailer from day dot, and how that contributed to your ability to build trust in the space. And I think now Birkin bags being sold, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 bags, Tag Philippe watches, you see some very heavy duty, very expensive luxury goods being sold online now. So it feels like that barrier to entry in terms of being able to create a luxury experience is gone up, but so has the trust level commensurately. If you can build that amazing cutting edge experience, you will find a market.
100%. There's never been a more important time in retail and in e-com to build a brand. That is fundamentally the most important thing as a retailer today. Digital acquisition costs are rising. It's becoming harder and harder to acquire new customers. So it is so important to hone in on existing customers and make sure that they have the best possible experience, and to make sure that there is that brand affinity, because it is that brand affinity that's going to convince a customer to continue to purchase a bag from one brand over another, and potentially to spend or pay a more premium price with one brand over another. One of the girls in my team, she will pay more at a beauty company here because the loyalty program is so good, and she wants to make sure she's maintaining her status. So she will pay a premium price on a product rather than paying the discounted price down the road, because she's got that brand affinity and she wants to make sure that she can tap into that loyalty program.
Yeah, brands like Sephora, and there's many brands like this now where they are really trying to almost create a Prime like experience, an Amazon Prime like experience, to where the value of their membership program, for example, or their loyalty program so outshines the relative cost of being involved in that program that it becomes an absolute no-brainer, and it just makes the whole entire experience completely sticky. And I feel like that's the whole direction that the entire market is going, is that there's this, it's really difficult nowadays to compete against Amazon. We know
Yeah.
this. It's it in Australia, Amazon was very late to the game. They were very slow out of the starting blocks, but we always knew that was going to be the case. In every new market they go into, they're slow out of the starting blocks. But now they've got the largest warehouse in the APAC region. In fact, they've got the two largest warehouses in the APAC region now, based in Australia, one in Melbourne, one in Sydney, and they are taking it to the market in every market that they enter, even if they're slow to start. And so I feel like there are certain categories that Amazon won't touch because at their current level of revenue, they need to be attacking categories that have potentially billion-dollar outcomes. They can't chase categories that even have million or hundreds of millions of dollars of outcome, because it doesn't move the needle enough in terms of shareholder return. So they got to swing for the fences with just about everything that they do. And if I was to say that Amazon had an Achilles heel, I would say that's it. I would say that there's areas that they simply cannot go into because it doesn't impact the bottom line enough. It's almost like a rounding error in terms of revenue. And it feels like that's the space where retailers and brands can now really start to stand out and differentiate themselves. Would you say that's, and I'm not talking just about Amazon. Obviously, there's other players. There's the Walmarts of the world. There's the very large retail chains. There's even the Myers of the world down in Australia. There's some very large retail chains that are doing millions and billions of dollars a year in revenue. But again, we're back to a space where curation and customer experience actually matters, because you're never going to win on price. You're never going to win on range. There's certain things you will never win on. And so if you're not creating a differentiated experience, and I actually find that's the hardest thing for retailers to actually be able to do, because when I join loyalty programs online, 9 times out of 10, they are spend, earn points, turn around, spend the points, earn more money. So it's an earn, spend, earn model that's really basic, and there's really not a lot of differentiation in that model. If everybody's doing it, there's no differentiation there apart from maybe the conversion rate of points to dollars. And so I feel brands have to be more creative than ever in terms of the experience that they're building, because otherwise it's just really difficult to stand out in a sea of sameness.
Yeah, I think there's two points to touch on there. One is how brands stand out, but the first is Amazon and the positioning of Amazon, and I guess how to compete with Amazon. Yeah, you're right. Amazon was sort of the party here, and I actually wasn't sure how they would perform here because Australia is such a dispersed country with such a relatively small population that it would be very difficult. I envisioned it would be difficult for Amazon to be able to serve the whole of Australia like they would the US, sheerly because of our population size, because we've got populations on the East Coast and then we've got not much in the middle of the country and then population on the West Coast. There would have to be a commercial decision for them whether they stick with the flight times and the fulfillment restrictions going from the East Coast to the West Coast, or they just neglect the West Coast entirely. What I've found since Amazon has come here is the value that they have in goods that you can get from anywhere. I guess that's been the key thing that I've seen. It's groceries, it's household goods, it's I guess products that are commoditized and you don't necessarily care as much about the brand, but where they won't be able to compete is on the brand itself. Now, you could have you can have a retailer, you can have Pandora selling a Pandora bracelet, and customers want the Pandora bracelet. We saw so many companies bringing out charms that could fit on a Pandora bracelet, but no one wanted those charms. Everyone wanted the Pandora charms. Now, the brands are in a fortunate position where the brands can control where their product is sold, because if they're a D2C brand, they can control the sales channel. So if they opt not to sell through Amazon, which I guess is a hard decision because there's a lot of traffic. But if they do opt to not sell through Amazon, then they can hold on to their brand, and suddenly there's a product that. So yeah, I'd say anything that's commoditized. If you're looking for kitchen goods or household goods or things where you know what you're getting, it might be challenging. It might be hard to compete. But if you have built a really strong brand, you could have you have two watches that are identical, and one has the Daniel Wellington logo on it, and the other one has no logo on it. And consumers 9 times out of 10 will opt for the Daniel Wellington watch because customers these days are so brand orientated. Which kind of leads me into how we're seeing brands stand out from the crowd. And we're seeing this real focus these days on the brick and mortar experience, but specifically what's being called retailtainment. So it's not just enough to open a store to sell product. It's about the experience that you're providing to your customers in that store. It's what level of you've got Camp in the US offering behind the doors experiences to customers through hidden doors where you can stay overnight and you get a whole different experience. There is a massive focus these days on different ways to encourage customers to come into a store or interact with a brand, even if there isn't necessarily such a push or such a focus on closing a sale in that moment. Because if you can create that brand affinity, then what that does is when the customer is ready to pull the trigger, you've got that edge on a competitor who's maybe selling a similar product to what you are.
Well, two brands immediately leap to mind for me in exactly what you're talking about. One is Nike, and two is Culture Kings out of Australia. Obviously, now basically United States-based. Culture Kings is they were founded in Australia, grew in Australia, and when we think of Culture Kings and we think of the retail theater that they brought to their physical retail stores with very famous, globally famous DJs coming in and doing music sets and doing meet and greets and autograph signings, and sports stars coming in and doing autograph signings, especially from the adventure sport and action sport world and skate world and surf world. And they're a streetwear brand or streetwear retailer. And so what they were doing is they were using really their stores or as experiential show with curated experiences to go along with that. Even if you never bought anything, if you were willing to wait in line, and I saw some of the lines for some of these events that they had at Culture Kings, they would wrap around the mall. They have several hundred people queued up. And so I think they're really smart at creating elements of retail theater and showmanship. And it's almost like I guess what we would think of as the old school Selfridges model, right? Where it's an experience to go into the store. Even if you can't afford to buy anything, you're still going to be able to go in and be immersed in the brand and have a really great time and walk out of there with a smile on your face. And I think the other place that does this really well is Nike in terms of they've got indoor basketball courts, they've got indoor driving ranges, they've got shoe fitment centers, they've got all these different experiences that you can have inside of a store. Even if you never spend a dollar, you can go in the store and you can have the Nike experience without spending a dollar. And I think the point here is that we need to create experiences that are so differentiated that people are willing to engage with your brand for the experience, even if they spend no money.
Correct. Exactly.
And
Yeah.
I guess if we fast forward, so you obviously famously co-founder of Afterpay, and Nick obviously drove that and had a great exit from that. And you guys have done so many great things in our industry in terms of really challenging the status quo in our industry in every respect. And here you are doing it again. We fast forward all the way to 3 years ago, you founded Flagship. You recently have gotten some pretty impressive funding. As far as I understand, you just secured a $2 million seed round for Flagship. And tell us how Flagship came to be. Obviously, you have this deep retail experience. You have this deep retail and digital experience. And obviously, you saw some kind of a gap in the market that you said, hey, I think I actually want to get into the software space and I want to develop something that's going to allow retailers to stand out and provide those best in breed experiences. And I'm going to build the tooling to make that happen.
Yeah. I just have to set the record straight because I can't take credit for someone else's work, but I didn't co-found Afterpay. I was involved early-ish, but definitely founders wholeheartedly, Nick and Anthony.
Nick and Anthony, yeah.
Yeah.
Because
So
as I understood, I thought you were involved right from the very beginning as well. But you were laterally involved, obviously, because you were involved in data and marketing. You were with them for almost 8 years, so obviously had a significant played a significant role in the growth of the platform.
Exactly. So, yeah, in the early days when there were only, I don't know, 20 to 30 people at the company, obviously everyone has to wear many hats. And I saw that there was a gap in the data team and the digital marketing team. So, kind of plugged myself in there. I've always been very data focused, very digital focused. I always will look at the data and see what opportunities there are. I always say that I never knew the first thing about jewelry. I just knew how to read data to put the right product in front of the right person at the right time. So everything I've always done has been digital and data led. And that's the way I worked at Afterpay. I would work with the sales team. I would understand our customer base. I would work out which brands they were most likely to be affiliated with and where they were most likely to shop, so that if we onboarded a retailer, we knew they'd have a great experience out of the blocks. Everything is, how do I use data in order to get that edge, and how do I use data to make sure that I can get that little, I don't know, incremental benefit. Fast forward a couple of years, and while I was still at Afterpay, I was also doing some contract work or consulting for an omni-channel retailer here in Sydney, and I was helping them with their e-commerce site. And I started asking them questions about their brick and mortar stores so that I could make better e-com decisions. And I realized that they couldn't answer any of my questions. And this to me was crazy. I've come from a world exclusively of data, exclusively digital, and I've got every little micro data point that exists across the ecosystem from the moment I serve an ad to someone right up until they convert, post purchase, before, after, everything in between. And this is a channel for this retailer that was driving 80+% of their revenue. And for the most part, they're shooting blind. So that really didn't sit well with me. And the goal for me from that moment on was, how do I bring more of the digital world into brick and mortar? How do I bring more technology, more data? How do I let retailers look at their brick and mortar stores through an e-com lens so that they can interact with their stores in the same way that I did my e-com site? Because from my perspective, from the perspective of head office, you should be able to treat your store like an e-com site, because the only difference is that you actually need someone to physically do the action that you're trying to achieve. Whereas online, it's obviously automatic through code. We went through a number of iterations, but ultimately what we did was we just spoke to retailers and we understood their challenges, understood their pain points. And the first main pain point that we uncovered was specifically centered around visual merchandising. So essentially deciding how and where to place product throughout a store. And we spoke to retailers in Australia with 5 stores. We spoke to a retailer in the US with 3,000 stores. And what we found was that retailers across the world were all doing visual merchandising the same way, which was, it was intuition, it was entirely art-based, and there was a lot of experience. And what would happen is someone would leave the company and they would take all of that experience and knowledge with them. And then someone would come in and they would have to start from scratch. And it was a function of retail where, because there hasn't really been much tech and innovation, it's been a function of retail where retailers have had to, in order to handle the increase in store count, they've just had to throw more people at it. So what we have done is we've taken the existing function of visual merchandising that already exists today and have migrated that into a digital platform. Visual merchandisers can now do the exact same job, but digitally and in a more concise way. But what we get through retailers doing what they were already doing, so visual merchandisers doing what they were already doing, is we now have every product's location in every store in that retailer's network. And we can map that placement through to revenue, and we can now tell retailers, based on where products are placed across the entire store network, how are those products performing. In e-com, there are jobs centered around conversion rate optimization. That is literally what I did every day. I would jump into my website, I would look at what our conversion rate was. I had three key metrics. I had traffic, conversion rate, basket size, because the multiple of those three gives me revenue. So if I knew that if I knew that I could maintain my basket size and I knew that I could increase my conversion rate, then that means that by increasing traffic, I get an exponential increase on revenue. Whereas if you have a low conversion rate, you can increase the traffic all you want and you're just going to be burning through cash. So giving that same mindset to brick and mortar, how do you improve that conversion rate? How do you optimize placement? How do you make sure that every store, even though I've got hundreds of stores across the country, how do I make sure that every store speaks to the unique demographic of that area? I could have a store in the East Coast. I could have a store on the West Coast. I could have a store in Nebraska. And those customers are all very unique people, very unique demographics. But to tailor the product offering to each store to date has been incredibly challenging. Personalization is huge in ecom, making sure that the person that visits the website sees the right product for them, or when they come back, they're seeing products that they recently viewed, or they've got access to their wish list or their card, and they've got their own tailored experience. That is so important in ecom. Yet in brick and mortar, everyone across the entire country is for the most part given the exact same experience. And that fundamentally is what doesn't make sense, especially in a market like the US, where there are so many unique types of people in the country. To be able to make sure that each store can speak to that specific customer base, we're finding is becoming more and more important, especially coming back to this brand narrative, where you want to make sure that customers that come in feel that brand connection, that brand affinity. And when someone in Nebraska is walking into a store and it looks like a store in New York, they might not have that same level of affinity with the brand as they would if everything was tailored towards the demographic.
And if I was to, because I've never used your platform before, just in all transparency, I've never worked with your platform before. I don't know exactly how it functions in like the nitty gritty technical process, and also from an admin function, like within the store, what the store merchandisers would need to do to interact with the platform. So I guess because of that, I don't necessarily have a frame of reference of what the platform could be compared to. Do you visualize yourself as a technology platform of one, or do you believe that something like an Omnio or Alexa Retail or some of the other sort of clienteling and merchandising platforms, do you feel that those platforms do some of the things you do, but not all of the things you do? Or do you feel like you attack a very unique problem in a very unique way to where you're a platform of one?
Yeah, I definitely would say we're a platform of one from what we've seen out there. We have seen a number of technologies that do fragments of what we do, but a lot of these technologies do that for. So what we're essentially doing is we're taking all of these practices, all of these technologies, all of these processes that already exist in ecom, and we're basically saying, how can we enable these one by one in store? Through our platform, yes, it's somewhat manual, but it gives some kind of indication that we can enable retailers to A/B test in their stores. And that's just something that fundamentally has never been possible, to be able to run an experiment and quantify an experiment and see, when we had this dress in the front window, how did that work? Versus when we had this dress in the front window, how did that work? If you go through everything in ecom, everything that you do, personalizations, pop-ups, refer a friend, all these little things that exist digitally, what we're trying to do is we're trying to take each of those little mindsets, those little 1%ers, and trying to say, how can we take that already exists digitally and bring that into brick and mortar?
And so if we dive a little bit into the technology and the implementation of what that normally looks like for a retailer, based on what you said so far, I imagine that effectively we're now effectively taking a digital blueprint of the store layout for each individual retail branch. We're now saying, okay, we're going to plot into that what our store layout looks like in terms of physical clothing stands or shoe stands, or what, it doesn't really matter what they sell, but at the end of the day, you're gonna allow a digital interface for those merchandisers to plug in certain merchandising stations, what products are located there from a SKU perspective, from a style perspective. Is it a piece on a mannequin? Is it just a stack of jeans? Is it you're looking at all of the various potential layouts and potential presentation types of a specific good in a physical store. You're then mapping that to the SKUs that are in that presentation location. You're then tracking sales over time. And then as the merchandiser starts to modify that store layout, starts to modify the type of shop fittings that they have, starts to modify the lighting, starts to modify the positioning of certain products within the store and how they're actually presented, whether we're now going to put a piece of an explanatory information, or we're going to put a TV screen next to it with a video talking about that product, or we're going to put a QR code now next to that product so that people can find out more and they have an endless aisle experience. And so I'm guessing that what you do is you allow brands to track those changes that the merchandisers would typically do anyway, but they would do it 100% based on gut feel. And then, so they're going to create a hypothesis, right? Their hypothesis might be, hey, if I take this product and I move it from that wall to the front of the store on a mannequin, then I would expect my conversion rate to lift by 5% or something like that. And so what you're saying is now we're actually able to tell you whether that's the case or not with a bespoke piece of software that's tailored to do exactly that.
Bang on. Couldn't have explained it better myself. That is literally it. Yeah, we create the digital representation of the store for each store in a retailer's network. That is that store. That is that e-com site. And to your point, they make changes. We can track those changes. We can quantify those changes, and we can let them know, did they see an uplift after the change? Was there a drop? Did that change do what it was meant to do? And when a retailer comes time to do their next drop because there's a new collection coming, what learnings do we have from previous collections that can be implemented forward to make sure that they don't get that initial drop in sales and everything does work straight out of the box? Or what styles should be created more, or what styles should be created less, and which style shouldn't go into a West Coast store at all, but only in an East Coast store. All of these little learnings that, to your point, haven't existed. It's been on gust, it's been on intuition. Now has data to back it up. So there are more precise decisions being made.
And would that extend into taking third-party inputs from things like weather APIs? And are you taking only information and data from within the stores, or are you also taking very much a hive mind mentality to this to say, we're going to start tracking buckets of changes that all of our customers make so that we can collectively learn from everybody, and we're going to make that anonymized. We're going to make the data anonymized so that one retailer doesn't know what another retailer is doing, but we're going to now start developing playbooks based on the collective data across our entire network of brands and stores. Plus, we're going to build in third-party data feeds around things that are happening in a specific region from a cultural perspective, from a social media perspective, from a weather perspective, from all these different inputs. And we're going to now start bringing that hive mind mentality to the decision-making opportunities. And we're going to actually now start to make recommendations to merchandisers instead of just reacting. And we're going to actually be proactive. And we're going to start, because with modern CRO technology, a lot of those recommendations will actually be made by the CRO tooling itself, and they will be making recommendations. Hey, you should change this flow. You should change this button. You should move it here. You should change this mega menu layout. So there's a level of closed loop feedback that happens in the CRO world that doesn't yet happen in the retail world.
Again, bang on. I think we should hire you. Everything is entirely bang on. The plan is to ingest and capture as many possible data sources as possible, outside factors such as weather, so you can see what that does to sales, but also being able to bring in weather forecasts and say, we know next week there's going to be a drop in temperature just for this one store. So that one store, we're going to redize that store for sweats, but we can leave all the other stores because they're all still hot. In Australia, the different states hit different seasons at different times. Queensland goes into summer first, New South Wales goes into summer second, and then Victoria follows last. So being able to say, okay, Queensland, here's your summer product, but New South Wales and Vic, you stay as winter. And then New South Wales hits summer and they can now move into summer product, but Vic still stays as winter. So being able to treat, again, each store tailored to and again, back to your point, being able to provide those recommendations. We can see that this product isn't performing in a high visibility area. If a product isn't selling, what we need to know is it not selling because there's no interest, or is it not selling because customers aren't finding them? So if it's the latter, we have an opportunity to test it in a high visibility area. And once it's in that high visibility area, then we get that learning. Or is a product not performing because there's a broken size curve? Is a style not performing because the matching bottoms are out of stock to the top? Being able to identify all of these little edge cases to say, this style has now got a broken size curve. We expect there's going to be a drop in revenue, and it is currently in your front window. So we recommend that you take that style out of your front window, move it deeper in the store until that size curve is fixed, and you replace it with this style. Or your front window is driving 3% of your total store's revenue, and similar retailers see 5% of revenue being driven by the front window. So to your point, being able to create those playbooks and that benchmarking across anonymized retailers. But then what I think is really cool is the ability to optimize a store for a specific goal, which again, you have from an e-com perspective, but being able to say, okay, we've got our sale period coming up. So we want to optimize the store to sell items that we're deep in stock of. Or we've got peak trade coming up, so we want to optimize the store for products that we've got high margin in. Being able to pull these different levers so that you can optimize for whatever the goal is at that point in time. Or we see that out of 100 stores, 99 stores are performing really well for this one style, but one store isn't. So we recommend that you consolidate and you pull that style out of that store and move it to the other stores that are selling it well. So again, it's all about making sure that product is in the right place at the right time. You've got the right stock coverage, products that need to be in a high visibility area, when you need a drop visibility, you drop visibility. It's turning visual merchandising into this living, breathing, ongoing exercise. It's no longer a snapshot or a moment in time. It's actually something that is always changing, always evolving. At 10 o'clock in the morning, you can have one product in your front window, and at 3 p.m., you can have another product in your front window. And it's all tailored towards what is most likely to work at that point in time, and it's entirely based on data.
And are you finding that any brands really look at like conversion rate in a retail store at all currently? For example, are they tracking the click count of number of bodies roughly that are walking through the front door versus how many numbers of sales they're doing in a given day? So they understand roughly what the conversion rate is to footfall. But I guess what you're going to allow them to do is to take that one level higher and say, okay, sure, this was your generic conversion rate, but here's your conversion rate down to SKU level, which is what you get online, right? You get, okay, a certain number of people visit this PDP or this PLP, and this was the conversion rate of people that visited those pages. So I can get hyper granular in terms of customer behavior research online. I know what people added a product to a wish list online. I know what people added a product to a cart. I know what people abandoned a cart. I know what people have actually made a purchase. I know which categories they visited, products, homepage, made it to the cart, but then abandoned at the cart, what people made it to checkout, but then abandoned at checkout. I know with like hyper granular detail the behavioral characteristics of people that have shopped with me online. But up till now, that really hasn't been available in store. So it feels like, sure, I've had some really raw, pretty crude data around like conversion rate in store, but this adds an additional layer of intelligence on top of that.
Exactly. I would say the more sophisticated retailers do have some level of foot traffic counter or people trackers that you can overlay sales on top of to work out a conversion rate. But any kind of tracking or metric that's provided in store is predominantly centered around the individual. There isn't a lot that's centered around the product, which is where we want to focus. Again, when I was running my website, every month I would look at every single product on my website. I would look at what its conversion rate was for that month based on clicks to conversions. And I would make sure that every product converted at a certain rate. And if it didn't, then I would need to work out, what do I need to do in order to improve that conversion rate? Do I need more imagery? Is pricing wrong? Should I pull it off the website entirely because it's taking clicks from a product where it could be getting clicks somewhere else? So what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring as much data down to the product level as possible. And there are a number of peripheral technologies that we're starting to explore to see if we can overlay what they're doing on top of what we're doing to be able to create that kind of cross section between the human and the item. The first solution that we explored before we landed on this platform was an element of individual item tracking. So to your point where you could add to cart or fitting room try-ons and conversion rates and bounce rates, but the tracking component of an item install was tricky. So we've parked that for the time being and until we can justify it.
And I guess as the cost of IoT comes down, then obviously then that suddenly starts to become a doable thing. You can actually track an individual item as it traverses the store and as it goes through different experiences within the store. But to your point, very few retailers are actually using IoT today. They might use it on a carton to track when a carton's been receipted, etc. But they're not going to track it down to the individual item level with an RFID tag on an individual item, right? That's pretty rare. Usually they're dumb tags. They're not smart tags. Yep. They're dumb tags on clothes to make sure that basically if you walk out the store with this tag still on the product, then it's going to set off the alarm. But this is not an RFID enabled tag. This is basically just a magnetic tag that's going to trip off an alarm when it goes through the sensors. So do you feel like IoT is going to help, and specifically RFID is going to help when that becomes commonplace and it becomes the norm in retail? Do you feel like that's going to move and accelerate your platform and your product up like to a whole new level?
That's the hope. Again, that was where we started. We started with RFID and we looked to be able to track item movement. What we found was that you can give as much data as you want, but if you don't give an avenue to do something with that data, it doesn't really get you anywhere. So what we're really focused on at the moment is enabling people to do something with the data first and then start overlaying more data in over time. Absolutely, I think it will end up taking our platform to the next level, and we're already in conversations with a number of IoT and enable companies to date. But it is definitely, that's more of a long-term strategy than anything that we'll be doing in the short term.
And if you were to look out over the next 12 to 18 months, you've had this massive seed round, which is great, fuses some big cash into the business, and you're able to do some pretty cool stuff with that. I'm sure a portion of that's going to go to product development, portion's going to go to sales, enterprise sales, etc. So I was very jealous when I saw Laura Doonan's post about your launch party. I was super jealous. I was like, man, I love being in Mexico, but I miss out on things like this when I'm not down in ANZ anymore. But when you look out over the next 12 to 18 months of what you guys are building, what are some of the high priority things that you already see in the market that you want to deliver? Or what are some of the things that you don't do today that your customers are asking for you to do that you're like, hey, here's priority 1, 2, and 3 that we really want to add to the platform?
Yeah, it's a great question. And to your point, again, you're bang on that. Our focus at the moment is definitely on product and engineering, making sure the product does everything that we need it to, and also starting to beef out the sales team, starting to grow in the US and start to ramp that up. So the use of capital, again, is bang on. We've got a ridiculous roadmap of features that we want to incorporate and product direction that we want to incorporate and different ways that we can take what we're doing to another level. But what we're finding is that because we've brought out a platform that for the most part hasn't really existed to date, and we're pioneering that space, there's so much that can be done just in our little bubble already that we still need to do. So we have these big grand ideas and different ways that we can enable more collaboration between business units in retail. But there's so much that we need to do in the product in its current state in order to take that to the absolute optimum that it can possibly be. Yeah, it's going to be a jam-packed couple of years in terms of using this capital and beefing out the product, but it is definitely going to be a marathon, not a sprint, because there's so much more that we want to take this to beyond just visual merchandising and beyond just brick and mortar.
Makes complete sense. And I'm guessing that system integrations are like native out of the box integrations with anything with retail, with anything to do with e-com. Like you live and die by your integrations. If it's a heavy lift for merchants to incorporate into their other systems, they won't do it usually, because all of a sudden now it becomes a hard business case to justify, especially when you're creating a new category of software, and out of the box integrations make that easier. So things like integrating with POS systems, integrating with ERPs, integrating with CDPs, integrating with PIM systems. It feels like the list of out of the box integrations that would be ideal for you to build is almost endless. When we think about your business model and when we think about how you guys make your money, you are a SaaS platform. How do you guys make your money? How do you charge for your platform? Is it on a per store basis? Is it on a per SKU basis? Is it on a per user basis? How do you guys make your money?
So we charge on a per store basis. We want to make sure that we don't limit access to the platform, so we don't charge per user, and we don't want to limit on size of catalog, so we don't charge per SKU. It's a very simple model. We just charge per store, and we are so early in the journey that our pricing is way too cheap for what we probably should be charging. But right now, fundamentally, I just want to make the lives of our retailers better. The revenue for me is an afterthought. So right now, I just want to get as many retailers as possible using it, because that's also how we learn. That's how we improve the product. We work really closely with our retailers. My head of product is meeting with retailers every other week, going through our platform, going through new features, going through peripheral solutions, and constantly trying to work out how we can make what we're doing better, what needs to be built in, what's missing. And this is just at the moment with our Australian retailers, and we're going to have to do it all over again with our US retailers. So the big thing for us is we make sure we listen to our customers, we listen to our retailers. And if I look back at Afterpay, was what Afterpay's success was built on, and what Nick's focus was from day one, that it had to be easy, it had to make sense, it had to make sense for both the customer and the merchant. And that was our mindset at ICE as well. We need to make sure that we provide the best possible experience for our customers. And that, as much as the platform is our IP, our service is also our IP. Like, we fundamentally, we enjoy the company of our retailers. We'll hang out with them just because we enjoy hanging out with them for no other purpose other than just enjoying their company. So yeah, we very much just try and embed ourselves in retail with retailers, understand retail. We've got a lot of people in the company, around the company, with a huge amount of retail experience. And we just listen. We listen, we learn. We don't do anything that we think should be done. We listen to them, and we let our retailers guide us in terms of what they want. There are features that one retailer wants built, and we don't really understand it, but we build it for them. And then every retailer wants to use it. We're just finding, when we listen to our retailers, they guide us in the right direction.
I guess that is the beauty of a SaaS platform, is when you build it for one, you build it for many. So that is the great thing. And it just ballpark, you don't have to give me specifics, but ballpark, if somebody wanted to adopt your platform today, roughly, what would they typically be paying per store today? Understanding that this is in flux and the pricing is likely to change as you continue to roll out new features, but just an indicator.
Yeah, our pricing at the moment is $150 per store location per month.
Wow. Again, you said it yourself, probably way too cheap, but also incredibly accessible and democratizing access to the data. And it feels like long-term, this is mostly a data play anyway, like in terms of, again, that hive mind of data. The more retailers you have feeding data into the system, the better off the playbooks and the recommendations will be back out of the system, and it will collectively make the platform a lot better and a lot more useful. And it's like, how Google Maps is free today. But at the same time, whenever you use Google Maps, you're also feeding data back into the system. So when you run into a traffic jam, they can now put the red line on the traffic because you're feeding them data back. You're not just consuming the data, you're also giving data back. So I feel like this is a pretty fair exchange of data, at least in the early days, until you find your foot and find that perfect PMF, and you're doing category creation, and that's always difficult in software. But look, it sounds super exciting. I'm super excited for you. Clearly, your family's pretty well off, I would say, by now, just as a guess. And so I would say that you probably don't have to do this, meaning that you could probably semi-retire now and go invest in startups, for example, and you wouldn't have to have an active daily role in running those businesses, and you could just let your money work for you. But what I respect about you is the fact that you're getting your hands dirty and you're actually working with retailers and alongside retailers, and you're taking an active role in trying to help them improve their businesses and make them more sustainable, and really help them grow at a time when there's a lot of uncertainty in the market, especially around retail. We've got super high inflation rates and therefore super high interest rates around the world, and all the central banks are telegraphing that they're going to continue raising rates to get inflation under control. So there's a lot of uncertainty in retail and discretionary spend. And it feels like you're doing something you don't have to do, but you're doing it because you're genuinely passionate about retail and helping retailers be better and do better. So kudos to you, because this is a big thing you've bitten off, right?
Yeah, we've definitely encountered some challenges along the way, but yeah, I guess to your point, the retail industry has been so good to me. I almost feel indebted to the industry. I feel like it's my duty to give back, and this is my way of giving back by listening to them, by understanding their pain points. And again, to your point, retail at the moment is challenging. The climate is challenging. And if there's anything that we can do to give them that 1 or 2 or 3% edge so that they get that cost efficiency, they get that cost reduction, maybe they can prevent that, maybe they don't need to add that headcount that they were going to need to add. Any of these little things that we can enable retailers to do to effectively impact their bottom line is a win for me.
Love it, love it, love where the heart is at there, love where the intent is at there. Now, thank you so much for your time. We've ripped through an hour, just unbelievably fast. It's been such a fun conversation. We're now at the point of the conversation where I get to flip the script and hand the microphone over to you and let you ask me one question, any question you like. It can be personal or professional. So, Simon Molnar from Flagship.ai, what is your question for me today?
I guess my question for you would be what you've had a pretty kind of impressive and extensive retail and ecom background, but as we both know, getting from A to B is not straightforward. So I guess the question is, what's been the biggest challenge that you've had to overcome? And I guess one step further is, what's the challenge that you've had to overcome that you've seen that a lot of other retailers have had to overcome as well, and that you've been able to collectively overcome by comparing notes and by sharing ideas with one another?
Awesome question. I'm going to give you one personal hurdle and one more professional hurdle. So and they're interlinked. When I had my own e-commerce pure play in the beginning, and then when I sold that business, I had run that business with my business partner for over 7 years. And when we got rid of that business and I was going back into the workforce, and I was looking at working maybe agency side, because that was really where I had that passion of working with lots of brands, nobody wanted to hire me because they thought that I was going to be completely uncoachable, completely untrainable. I'd been my own boss for over 7 years, and they were like, how are you going to come in and be part of a team? How are you going to come in and have a boss? How are you going to come in and be told what to do? How are you going to have that? And I remember it was 286 applications I had to make before I found a job in an agency that would basically take a risk on a guy who had owned his own e-commerce business before. And so that was how I guess I got back into the industry, from owning my own brand to all of a sudden wanting to work with retailers at scale through agency life. That was a serious challenge. It was one that I didn't expect. I assumed that with my experience, everybody would be all over it and they'd be like, man, okay, there's not too many people like you out there with this level of experience. We really want to bring this in-house, into our agency or into our retail brand. And it wasn't the case. So that was a shock to me very early on. This is going back nearly 2 decades ago now. But the point is that some things don't turn out exactly how you think they're going to turn out. And sometimes they're much harder to face down, and to keep a positive mindset, and you have to have a really strong sense of self-worth in those scenarios to say, look, I am valuable. I do good work. I will be a good employee for somebody. I will be a good team member to other team members. And you just have to have enough self-confidence to just keep going hard at that, like a bull at a gate, until the next opportunity opens for you. I really genuinely believe that. And I think that people are going to have to take a very similar mindset now, with layoffs escalating and brands having to do more with less. There's going to be more people out there looking for work. It's going to become a competitive environment, and people are just going to have to back themselves, and they're going to have to, really just have that level of confidence that, hey, I have something to give to this industry, and I'm just going to have to keep looking until I find a place that recognizes that value. So that would be the first thing. And then secondarily, I think that the challenges that we have gone through as an industry have been around capability and around being able to scale that capability as businesses have grown. And as digital demand has grown. And I'm now seeing that because I work so heavily with B2B brands, I'm seeing the B2B industry, B2B e-commerce in particular, I'm seeing them go through the exact same growing pains we saw traditional retail and digital go through, say, starting a decade ago. Now there's quite a lot of knowledge, there's quite a lot of skills out there, there's quite a lot of people that have both retail and digital skills, and that they understand the full spectrum of retail across all channels, and they really get it. And in the cases of specialization, some people are deeply specialized, might be in digital marketing, might be in merchandising, might be in operations, might be in whatever. And so I feel like the retail space has gone through a really trying time of trying to get enough resource into the space to be able to allow them to execute at a high level. And there are still issues around that, sure, but nothing like there was, say, a decade ago. And it's largely been solved, and there's definitely avenues for people to get into the retail space now. But I think B2B, what I'm seeing is exactly the same thing. I'm seeing people that have deep B2B experience, but also people that have deep digital experience and skills. Those are like unicorns. They're really like unicorns. So one of two things has to happen. Either they've got to promote from within these B2B businesses, and they've got to help upskill those B2B resources to get them up to speed with digital skills, or the other way around. They go and they hire people with really strong digital and e-com skills, and then they have to upskill them on all of the B2B complexities of how B2B businesses operate. And so I'm literally witnessing it. It feels like Groundhog Day, because I'm having these conversations with B2B businesses almost every single day around where do we find people that have B2B skills and digital skills. And I'm like, you're going to have to create them, because we had to create them in the retail space. We had to, when I first started out, and I think most of us in the retail and digital space, especially those of us that have been in it for over 2 decades, we're mostly self-taught. Like, you couldn't go to university and get a degree in ecom. It didn't exist. And so we it was trial and error. It was hard. There was no easy systems and technology. Everything, like, lots of stuff was bespoke built. There was no trust in the industry. Like, it was hard, man. And I feel like B2B is getting a little bit of a taste of that now because of the opportunity looking out over the next decade in B2B ecom. These brands are realizing, especially on the backside of COVID, man, we got to up our game here, because the demand and the expectation is there that people can buy online, especially as B2B buyers are being replaced. Like, the older B2B buyers are being replaced by a younger generation that are default digital, and they just have a natural expectation that they can buy online. So that's the challenge I'm seeing, and that's one of the challenges I'm trying to help address with my consulting and my coaching work and my mentorship work and all those things. So I'm trying to give back too, because like you, I have an immense amount of gratitude for the lifestyle that this industry has allowed me to create for myself and my family. And I just feel obliged to send the ladder back down again in every way that I can, because this is a special space. And sure, you get the occasional bad apple, but for the most part, people that work in digital and e-com are cool people. And they're people that you'd want to hang out with. They're people that you want to go get a beer with. They're people that you want to go to conferences with and actually hang out with after the conference. And so I would encourage, and it's a very open industry too, and it's quite different to a lot of other industries. It's still such a young industry that, hey, if you're hungry and you want to achieve in this industry, we'll welcome you with open arms. And that's pretty much been my experience across the board.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I know it was a long-winded response, but I felt like it deserved a bit more detail than just a trite little quick one-liner.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's really, really fascinating. I haven't thought too much about the B2B ecom, but as I was thinking about it, as you were saying it, I can definitely see firsthand the challenges that we faced back in the jewelry days. So yeah, I think it's definitely a space that has a way to go.
100%. If the opportunity's there, then the people will flock to it ultimately at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Listen, Simon, this has been such an enjoyable conversation. I really appreciate your time. I wish you absolutely every success with your platform. This is an exciting time to be in retail, and I think you're adding to that excitement and you're adding to that opportunity. You're creating entirely new opportunities for our industry, and hats off to you for doing that, because I know how hard software development is. It's really a difficult game, and hats off to you for doing something that you don't really have to do. It's your way of sending the ladder back down again. So thank you for your time, and I can't wait to speak to you again soon, my friend. Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.